In November of 2006, Sean Bell was killed by the police outside of Club Kahlua in Jamaica, Queens. It was the morning of his wedding. On April 25, 2008, all the officers involved were acquitted of all charges. We went to the club to ask people in the neighborhood about the verdict.
When you heard the verdict, what was your reaction?
I was horrified. They shot that man a lot of times, 50 times.
Like millions of other people in this country and around the world, it was like a kick in the gut. Even for people who know what this system does, how it murders people.
That court verdict last Friday was a green light to police that they can murder Black and Latino youth and get away with it. 50 shots, unarmed men who were doing nothing wrong, committing no criminal activity.
And there are millions of people that feel this way. People are sick of crying. They're sick of the tears. They're sick of the broken hearts. And they're sick of this happening over and over and over again and lives being stolen.
I'm quite sure if it can happen to us, it can happen to you. Let the shoe be on the other foot. What you gonna do then? Your son was murdered for nothing. Coming out.
And there you have it, Mitch. You were there pretty much in a legal way for a very long time with the family. Your thoughts?
On what? On the verdict?
On the verdict.
Well, the verdict was not something that, to be honest, took me by surprise because the seeds of what was to come was laid very early on by the district attorney's office. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of reform that needs to be done in terms of the district attorney's office being allowed to investigate the police. This has been going on for years. A lot of people have said this before I have, but there needs to be an independent prosecutor to prosecute those kinds of crimes when they're committed by police because the district attorney's office obviously relies on the police department to provide them with evidence. The initial crime scene was not taken care of properly, was not secured properly. And at the very outset, when they started to present the case to the grand jury, I actually said that they were presenting too much information to the grand jury, which allowed the defendants to not have to take the stand because the grand jury testimony was some of the grand jury testimony was read into the record. And Donald can attest to this. Anytime you have a criminal case going on, no DA puts their entire case in the grand jury. I mean, you put in enough to get the indictment. And it felt like it was a trial. The grand jury proceeding itself was a trial. The DA's office fumbled this case. Now, if you ask me, should all of them have been convicted? That's up to, a judge. But certainly, Michael Oliver, who fired the most shots, definitely, if the case had been tried properly and done properly, should have been convicted of at least reckless endangerment. But the case was not properly presented. The case was not properly prepared. The district attorney, basically, in my view, flubbed the case.
Okay. So now, Mitch, when we look at this $7 million settlement, break it down for me and tell me where all this money goes.
Well, the settlement that you have, the bulk of it, I think it's 3.2 or so, goes to the children, because that's the estate of Sean Bell that's suing the city of New York. And that money goes to the children because under the law, the estate powers and trust law, there is what we call next of kin. Mm-hmm. And since Sean was not married, his next of kin would be the children that he has. New York is kind of antiquated in that way, mm-hmm. in that if you're married, it's your spouse that's your next of kin, mm-hmm. and the children wouldn't get anything, depending on certain things. If you're not married and you have kids, it's the kids that's the next of kin. If you don't have any kids, it's your mother. If you're not, or your parents. If you don't have any parents, and it's your siblings. So everybody in this situation, because of this tragedy that's affiliated or connected with Sean in any way, mm-hmm. on a familial standpoint, were hurt and injured, but his parents had no legal right to bring a case. And clearly his fiancée did not have the right to bring a case. That portion of the money goes into a trust for the kids. Right. The guardian of the children can have access to that with court approval.
Okay, now
Mitch, Guzman got $3 million, and then Trent Benefield got, I think, close to $1 million.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, for those who are listening to us in Yonkers, we say good evening. Those in Richmond Hill, good evening. And at this point, Mr. Michell, we're going to bring Sean's mother in. Good evening, Mrs. Bell.
Good evening. How are you?
How you doing? We're fine. It's good to have you on with us this evening. It's been a while, and after the death of your son, it took quite some time for the city to come to some kind of financial settlement, which personally, in my opinion, wasn't enough. Let you know that off the bat. No man's life is worth what they're offering here, but it's been some time, and I know you have gone through a lot. And we here at WB Radio, again, our deepest condolence to you and the entire family and the kids.
Thank you.
It's good to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Share some of the emotions that went through you this week when you saw this, when you heard of this settlement.
Like I said, no money can bring my son back, and you can't buy love, and that's the love that he has for his children. That is much, much more than that money. So I didn't really say much or talk much about it because, like I said, it's been still a hurting time for us for going on 4 years.
It has to be.
Yes, still is, and it'll always be. It's, going to be a void in our hearts forever.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it took place at a time when it was supposed to be the happiest day of any man's life.
Yes.
On the day he was supposed to marry his fiancée, Nicole Poulter Bell. And again, we look at the trial, how the trial went. And Mr. Michell, if you'd like to comment on this, again, you said something earlier on about how the case was presented, and your thoughts after the verdict came down, and it shook a whole lot of us. I mean, I was kind of surprised that no one was convicted.
Well, let me say this. A lot has been said about the verdict, and I just said a little bit. But I think that now that we have Mrs. Bell on, and I have to say, good evening, Ma.
Good evening.
I got to say that. This is one of the strongest women I've ever encountered in my life. And what she has done since her son was murdered by police, and what she continues to do now, there's a lot of information that she has, which you might want to ask her about, talk to her about what she's currently doing in terms of, his memory and his legacy and the foundation. So you might want to ask her stuff about that. I think she's more interested in talking about that than, kind of going back to other things.
Well, and I know the street that he was killed on, it was renamed in his honor, which was very, very good. I must say, big up to Mr. Leroy Comrie. I know he was at the forefront of that one. And wherever you are, Mr. Comrie, good evening.